start this meeting. So I'm gonna call this special meeting of Public Works to order. It's February 26th,
Yeah.
and it's 7:37. I'd like a motion to approve the minutes from February 7th, 2019, the special meeting.
I so move.
And I move to correct a date of January 20th.
Okay,
Point of order,
correct.
we don't have a quorum.
What are we, 4, 5, 6
Oh, you're right. Okay,
out of 12?
Out of 12, we need
Right.
7.
So we're at 50%?
right, we don't have a quorum.
We don't have a quorum. I'd love to get going too, but we need a quorum.
Okay, so we'll wait, because I know Dave is coming, he has
I think we have to wait.
the train thing.
And we certainly can't accept minutes or we can't do any
Yeah,
action.
right.
But I do have a question, so are these the minutes from, because I noticed one, I think it was 2 meetings ago, not ours, where your last name, Rolf, was put in as your surname, I think, if I was reading the minutes correctly, but I don't think we approved those ones.
We didn't approve those, because that was a regular meeting, so I'm gonna wait till a regular meeting to
Oh,
approve
okay,
those.
gotcha. So when that comes up, I'll
Right.
hopefully remind myself. Right?
Appreciate it. I didn't notice.
I think it said, I think it said Mr.
It's like going to the
Rolf.
phone book and
I have to
they
read
make
them
sure
again,
that
but I think it said Mr. Rolf, or,
Mr. Rolf.
but everybody else was Mr.
Sounds good.
whatever, Smith, Jim, Jones, whatever,
Okay,
I think, if I remember.
that was a while ago.
Yeah, it was. So, are we expecting a
Yeah,
seven?
David said he would be here.
David.
Okay,
Anybody remember what the password is?
town hall something.
I might have
Is it
written,
Darien Town Hall?
yeah,
Try it.
I wrote it down somewhere.
That's it?
Is it?
Very good.
See, and then there is some like that,
Good for something to.
not a lot.
Terry, do you have this ordinance, the latest ordinance?
I didn't have a chance to read or print
No
more
copy?
stuff, yeah, so I'll take that, thank you.
Rolf, do you have the latest copy?
So which copy is it 2.0?
Yeah, this just came to me tonight, so it's,
So this one?
no, well, I don't know if that's the second page.
That's page
draft
2.
two,
Okay,
I didn't.
Draft 2.0 from last night, it looks like.
yeah, does it say
Oh, this one?
draft on it?
Yeah, that should say in the front.
From last night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Is this it? Oh, yeah, John, 2.0. Okay, yeah.
You're good.
Well, I wonder if we can keep going but just not transact it.
I think we can't vote.
Yeah, we can't vote.
No, we can.
Can we talk?
We can discuss and stuff.
Okay,
So why don't we,
and
why
we'll
don't we
just,
do that?
okay,
I didn't mean to be the
right.
standing in the way of
And I
progress.
didn't know,
Yeah.
so I was swayed. Okay, so we're gonna start this over, Christian, so, we're gonna call this meeting, special meeting of Public Works on February 26th to order. It's 7:41, and we will wait to approve the minutes until we have a quorum. So tonight, we are going to focus solely on the plastic bag ban. And I thought what I would do is first bring you up to speed on a couple of things that I've done. I was asked to go to the rules meeting on Monday and give an update, and it was covered the hearing, which we already did, so we don't have to worry about that. There was Jack Davis from F&B asked a few questions, and I was able to get answers. So what we want to do is get the questions sooner rather than later, right? So one of his questions was, on the, because he's finance and budget. Hey, David, do
Hey,
you?
sorry I'm late.
No, that's
You're
okay.
right on.
Okay, I
Yeah,
apologize.
We need you. Do you have a copy of the ordinance? Did
Yes,
you
it was
made a
circulated this
copy?
afternoon, yeah.
Yes, okay. And I'm, you know what, I got it. Oh, thanks, Frank.
So sorry?
No, that's great. We just called it to order. And actually, I'm wondering if anybody wants to take minutes?
I'll do it in a minute.
Thanks.
Can I just ask one, I forgot your name, what's your name?
Dick, or Richard, P-O-L-I. I go by Dick.
Okay.
So, David and Frank, so I'm just bringing them up to speed on what happened at the rules meeting on Monday. It was a recap of the hearing, so we all discussed that. Jack Davis from F&B asked some questions. One of them was regarding the 10-cent charge and how that is applicable on a sales tax basis. So, I don't know, okay, so let's say you buy, $100 worth of bags. You buy, 1,000 bags and you have a $100 bill. Do you pay 6.3 on that? I don't know, Wayne is looking into that. The other question is, which was more important, I think, was for the consumer, we have that 2-week period in the summer when we don't pay any sales tax. So would this potentially bump an item that's $99.99 above 100, and the 100 is the threshold? And it would not happen because the sales tax is based on the individual item, so it wouldn't be applicable. Does that make sense?
That second part absolutely does make sense.
Okay.
And I think the answer to the first part is also, you're charging a 10 cents on the original bill. So if you're buying $100 worth of groceries, doesn't matter, $100 worth of a taxable item, you're gonna pay 10 cents. If the $100 worth fits in one bag,
Right.
right, you would be paying 10 cents for that single bag, not based on the 106 and a half or whatever the sales tax rate is.
Right,
Right,
yeah, hopefully that's the way it goes.
Right, so that seems to, that's the only way it makes sense, because otherwise, David, as you said before, you'd be effectively charging a fee on top of the tax.
Right.
Which you don't
Right.
wanna do.
Okay,
So wait, I'm confused. So the fee is above the line or below the line? It's irrespective of tax.
The fee is, if the fee is
The
applicable.
fee can't
it's
be
a-
taxable. It's a
Right,
fee.
right, exactly. So
So it doesn't matter.
Right,
Do I have this right?
yeah, but that's what Wayne is looking into.
Okay, all right.
Because it's not crystal clear.
I guess, then it could only, so you're right, so I've got the math backwards, right? So it would only be that you don't charge sales tax on the fee.
Right, that's what I meant, so it's not above the line, it's below the line, meaning
That's what-
Right.
the fee is applied per transaction,
Correct.
not per merchandise.
Correct. Yeah. I think we're in
And the
aggressive
merchandise
agreement.
drives the sales tax.
I think we're in aggressive agreement. Yeah.
Right, you'd have to characterize the sale of the bag as a separate sale, that the fee is actually, the ordinance is actually requiring you to sell a paper bag to somebody.
Which is not
But
what,
it's not a
That's not what the
sale.
ordinance says.
But it's not a
Right,
sale.
Right, so there should be
It's
no
an
tax
assessment.
so there should be no tax on the fee,
Great.
Okay, we're gonna wait and
in
get
a
it.
perfect world.
A definitive. Jack also asked for, a declaratory judgment. It has something to do with going to the Connecticut Supreme Court and basically asking them to rule on the legality of this 10-cent charge.
And Darienne's gonna do that?
Yeah,
That's
so,
crazy.
right, so we're not gonna do that
Okay.
because that
Because
doesn't.
you don't go straight to the Supreme Court, you start at the trial court, it's a declaratory judgment.
Right.
And there has to be some controversy before the court's gonna rule, and if you're just asking whether what we did is right without somebody saying, no, it's wrong,
Right.
the court's gonna say, there's no case or controversy, you're out of court.
Right, that's what, I think that Jack's daughter works for a law firm or is an attorney in New York, and I think that might be a little bit different there, I don't know, but that answer was, that's not gonna happen.
well, I hope she billed Jack for that hour.
I would have only billed them .1.
That's why you're still working, David. You're retired on the boat if you billed that hour.
Okay, Then the next thing I did was I did a kind of a walk around with Jamie yesterday, and today I went on my own and visited different stores to get a feel of how the merchants are reacting to this. And we visited the Sports Shop, Coco and Mayo, the Darien Shoe Repair, Morley's, Authentic Athlete, Rosie's, Tina Dragone, Brooks Brothers, Johnny's, the Dock Shop, the Darien Newsstand, and the Authentic Athlete.
It's 11 stops.
Yeah.
That was a lot of time.
Yeah, it was a lot of time. My takeaway was that that I think in general the word about a plastic bag ordinance is out. I didn't come away thinking that stores, merchants were that well educated about the ramifications for them if they use paper bags. They didn't realize that the content could be an issue, and they didn't realize that the 10 cents would apply to them. So they would also be charging 10 cents. Some people had real problems for the sports shop. We met with the manager, and he just flat out said that they're not charging the 10 cents. So the sports shop has about, they use about 300 bags a day, and I asked them to get back to me on what their inventory is and what their burn rate is. I felt like they were interested in being green, and although they like their bags now, they would give up aesthetics to be more environmentally conscious. But the fee was a big sticking point. Some of the stores.
Did you ask why the sports shop or anybody is opposed to the fee?
Yeah, they don't want to charge their customers. They just flat out don't want to do that.
Yeah, I can understand that.
They,
They're an upscale store. They don't want to impose, somebody spends $500 in the store. They don't want to impose 20 cents bag fees. You know, it's not how they do business.
they really, yeah, there was a lot of pushback on the fee. And the other pushback was on the sourcing of the paper bags. So the new ordinance will have recycled is what is requested, and that will work for some stores. So for instance, I spent a lot of time in the, we spent a lot of time everywhere. It probably took like 5 hours total. So for instance, there are some stores like the Darien Shoe Repair place. Does anyone not go there? Has anyone not been to the shoe repair place? Okay.
Is that place tucked in behind,
Like the
like behind the
Giovanni's?
post office behind?
Right.
Yeah.
It's next to the tailor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Right.
I know where it is, but.
Okay. So he uses this bag, right? So he puts your shoes in this bag, or he puts your shoes in that flimsy bag if you have more than one pair. This is a recycled paper bag. This costs, I did my own research on this, and I'm not sure if this is exactly what he pays, but if I was gonna buy a bag today, this would cost me 4.4 cents a bag, okay, for the recycled bag. Morley's has a bag that's recycled and is of recycled material, so it's
Yeah,
recyclable.
that's the difference with like recyclable means that recycled would be that it's made of
Right,
recycled
So
material.
this is recyclable, but it's
Right.
not recycled virgin material.
Right,
right,
Okay, it's virgin, not recycled.
Right.
Right.
Source,
right,
got it.
right, so you can recycle this, but it's not made from recycled material.
right.
This is both, and this, if I was going to buy this bag, and obviously they're not exactly the same, but this bag would cost me 48 cents if I wanted to buy this today.
Yeah, but that's the handles.
Yeah.
Right, I mean, it's not apples to apples, but you
Right.
get the feel, you can see that the cost difference is pretty dramatic,
Substantial.
Printed or not printed?
unprinted,
Just as you,
unprinted. So 48 cents versus 4.5 cents.
Factor 10.
And yes, and then on top of that, that gentleman does use this bag to put your, if you have more than one pair of shoes, okay? So I tell you this because I feel like I really wanna make sure that we are paying attention to the business people in town. They're not the ones that are generating 100 or 200 or 300 bags of these a day. They, you know, maybe they have 10 bags a day if they're having a good day. So, some of them, like Brooks Brothers, some of the bigger stores, well, Brooks Brothers, for instance, is already in Greenwich, and they are already in Westport. So the fee was a new thing for them. Again, that was unexpected. There are some stores like Johnny's. You guys know Johnny's? You know Johnny's. The record
Oh,
store.
the
record store.
The record store.
Oh, yeah.
That's
I'm
because
gonna
you're too young.
Surprised they're still
oh, yeah.
there.
It's still there.
Yeah.
So they did move forward, and they are selling for $3.50 a white bag that has their stamping on it. So they got in front of this a little bit. So you all know about Helen Ensign, right? So I sent you out that.
Mhm.
Okay. So I didn't do, you know, a spreadsheet for all these stores, because honestly I just didn't have time. But I can tell you that there's anywhere between a year to 3 years worth of material. The sports shop, that's a big number, I'm waiting to hear from them, but they also have a big backlog of Christmas bags that they need to use up.
Interesting though, but in here, in the writing, it says a product bag, which is exempt from, includes door hanger bags, which would essentially be that dress bag, that
It would be the garment bag.
garment bag, right?
But
So,
it wouldn't be,
so it's exempt from it anyway.
right, that bag is, but I actually don't have,
The smaller.
yeah, but
Smaller
for
one,
instance,
okay.
the smaller bag like this.
Got it.
And so what she did is, I mentioned to her that the state, you know, that we're looking at this, but that state is also looking at this, because she was concerned because she needed to place an order for 3,000 bags in the next 2 days. So I said, I don't have an answer for you, but I will tell you, the state is also considering something like this, and they will eventually, one of the proposals is to phase out all plastic, so she went ahead, and on this big bag, she went ahead and she ordered paper bags. But she still has between 5 and 3.5 years supply of these smaller bags. Okay? So,
So what I'm hearing, and I don't want, I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt.
no, this is when we're gonna open it up.
So I guess what I'm hearing is that the real sources of the plastic bag pollution that produce I mean, what was the number go, it's 6 million bags in a year, and in this town, and 90% of them are from the supermarkets and from,
Right,
and the people who are really having trouble with this are the small retailers, right? And I'm just trying to square the circle here. And Greg Palmer's comment was that he will only agree to this if everyone else has to do it, right? Is because he wants to recoup the fee.
right.
So I guess I'm wondering, do we address 95% of the pollution, right? If we draw a line and say, look, if you're above X number of bags per year, you have to do this.
Right,
And if you're below X number of bags per year, you have an additional 2 years to comply, or something like that.
right.
Like, this is gonna be the rule for everybody, but in anticipation of, people have a lot of inventory to burn off, and in anticipation of, the state is gonna come in with something that supersedes all this stuff and is gonna make all this negotiation irrelevant. Do we respect our local businesses by saying, look, you have a pass for, I don't know what Helen Eaton does, right? Or, I mean, the sports shop is pretty significant business, right? And Dick, I get your point that the sports shop doesn't wanna
Yeah.
tack a 20-cent charge onto a $1,000 bill, because they have a lot of bills that are really big, right?
Right.
And good for them. Do we say, look, you have a pass, if you're under 5,000 bags a year, right? Because that still addresses the 6 million at the Stop and Shop, at the Palmer's, at Whole Foods, at anywhere else,
Yeah.
right? And just say, look, and then the question is gonna come, like, right here, David asked, how do you enforce that?
Well, who's gonna count?
Well,
Right,
exactly,
yeah.
I mean, then you're kind of on the honor system, like, you know, and do we just say, okay, like, there's no way Helen Easton is doing 5,000 bags a year? And so we say to her, look,
Can I-
here's where this is going.
Can I ask about, the sports shop, like, are there bags, I mean, I've never seen a plastic bag come out of that place, but,
Yeah,
they're
they're paper.
they're paper, but are they recyclable? Cause
No,
I've got about 50 of them at home.
yeah,
Oh, I just tossed
That
it.
no, but my feeling is the sport shop will move towards the recyclable bag.
Yeah, I would think so.
Their problem is the 10 cents. And I actually had a few stores that said they're just not gonna do that. And I said, okay, well, you understand if there's an ordinance, there has to be enforcement. If there's enforcement, there has to be a fine. Are you gonna be okay with a fine, you know, once a week?
Well, with that attitude, I would suggest that we say that after five violations in a calendar year, that we start imposing daily violations. You know, if businesses are gonna take that kind of attitude, then maybe our ordinance needs to be a little more, have a
Well,
little more teeth to it.
okay,
Right, so,
well,
so
I
I
really
think,
don't like that when a business says, I don't care what your law says, I'm not gonna do it.
yeah.
That's not right.
Well,
because Stop and Shop is much more easily absorb the cost of a recurring ordinance, just as part of the cost of doing business. If they say, screw that, I'm just giving up my plastic.
I
You know,
think
if you get 5 violations in a calendar year, then, you know, you're a recidivist,
Okay.
and maybe you need to have a little more, you
Okay,
know,
but
skin in the
I
game.
think, David, that what I found was that people were, not as informed. And so when I was standing in front of them telling them what's gonna happen, they didn't have all of this information, you know,
Right.
coming at them. So what I did do is I went through and it took a while, and I don't have the source here, I don't think, but it was a website that has all of the states and every city in that state that has an ordinance. So what I did was
Really?
went through and looked, and
That's what's right.
and I picked the three things that I think are, what we should be debating right now. One of them is the mill, this, no, am I saying wrong?
Yeah, the thickness.
The thickness, but I'm
You're right,
gonna
the
say
mill.
mill, right? Oh.
The mill thickness.
So the mill thickness. So, one way to help some of these establishments, for instance, the Helen Ensign, is to adjust the mill rate, because her mill is 4. And when I went through, I realized that there is no state in the country that is above 4. Honolulu is going to 10 on January 20th. Connecticut is anywhere from 2.25 in Westport up to 12 in Greenwich and in Norwalk. It's 4 in Weston. So what I want to do tonight, you guys, is come up with some solutions to help as many people as we can. So I think, do we all agree with Frank that the purpose of this ordinance is really to tackle this problem? Do we all agree on that?
Yes, it's the
Okay.
thin, single-use bag.
Okay. And to do that,
But wait,
No.
no,
No.
No.
It's also, according to what we would have heard all along, is that those paper bags are just as bad for the environment as those plastic bags. So, it's either one or both or the
And
other.
the purpose is to get people not to take any check.
Exactly.
Right.
Right.
I say this at every meeting, we're trying to change behavior. We're trying to encourage a change in behavior by both the retailer and by the consumer.
mhm,
And both are going to feel pain as a result of this, because habits are hard to break. And so we have to make it just as a little uncomfortable, but not so overbearing. The last thing I want is another regulation jammed down anybody's throat that doesn't have a good purpose to it and a good reason for it.
All right, but if I understand you correctly, then you're implying, if not saying, you want not just a ban on single-use plastic bags, but you also want to then ban
Non-recyclable.
paper bags as well.
I want to
Almost think everyone would
encourage
take less.
people to bring their own bag
Okay, so how are you gonna do that with regards to the paper bag?
With the 10-cent fee.
with a 10-cent fee.
Okay, now, didn't we establish though that the retailer had the option whether or not to impose that fee?
No.
No, no, it's the
It's
opposite.
mandatory.
No.
It's compulsory.
Well, it's compulsory as currently
If we
in the
decide-
draft ordinance.
If we vote that we want the 10-cent fee, we're writing this ordinance. It's happening right here. So it's everybody's opinion.
But if it's not mandatory, then people aren't gonna be driven to
That's
bring
right.
reusable bags, because people aren't gonna wanna pay, you know, an extra $1 or $2 at the grocery store to get 5 or 10 paper bags, you know, or 20 paper bags, whatever it's gonna
Right,
be.
but I thought the 10-cent fee was to relieve the burden of the cost increase for the paper bag.
It's to do.
That was the intent as I understood
Well,
it.
No, well, it
as
depends
it's
on who
written
you're
in the
talking
ordinance
to.
right now, that's what it is. I happen to object to the way the ordinance, the draft is written, because it throws the onus totally on the retailer as to the reason for the fee. It should be shared. It's a shared responsibility. The retailer should try to recoup cost, and the consumer should feel a little bit of pain because they didn't bring their own bag. It should be a shared responsibility. That's the way this should be approached,
Okay, so.
in my view.
Okay, so we could share the pain and not go to the extreme. And the extreme could be that this is the 12 mil bag, okay? This is the bag that is, is gonna cost you $1.50 in the store if you don't have your own bag, all right? The 4 mil bag is not, this is not the bag that we're seeing in the storm drains, I don't think, and we're not seeing this flying around, okay? There are lots of places that do something as small as this is what Westport has. This is a 2 1/4 bag, okay? So this is what the majority, if you look at this sheet, this is what the majority of states do. They do a 2 1/4 to a 4, okay? Nobody does a 10, and I don't even know why there's nothing in between.
But do we know the recycling protocol for that type of bag? Like, does it go in the single stream? Like, what do we do with it in Bridgeport?
That's a good question.
Like, that's, I know that doesn't end up in the storm drain, but if
Right.
it doesn't end up being recycled, it just sits in a landfill for
Or
eons.
gets burned in Bridgeport.
Right.
Right.
That's a good question. I will have to find that answer.
I think that's probably what happens, it just gets burned in Bridgeport.
Well, if it gets vacuumed out,
It probably doesn't get into the storm drain because not too many people are using that to pick up dog poop. It's not
While
that
you're-
Well, yeah, no,
while-
it was-
while
that was
you're
just
finding
saying
out on that,
the blight.
can you, Joe Warren?
Well, why doesn't somebody else help me find out?
come on, Monica.
Because I have actually done a lot of research.
Yes, you have.
But I'll find out what happens.
But the question of Joe Warren's is, what are they doing to figure out a way so that they're not sucking them out and burning them? Are they working on any kind of, for that, what's their long-term plan, if any?
I have to think that this bag, because if you look at all of these states that have 2 1/4, there must be a way to recycle these bags. That's my gut feeling.
That's my gut as well, but I don't.
But I will.
Yeah,
find out.
I would double check
It
on
may
that.
just not be available in Bridgeport, but
Right.
somewhere, somehow.
But
Then,
recycling isn't an answer. That's, the problem with recycling is it's guilt-free consumption. People feel they can take things that, are using oil and fossil fuels and it's okay because I can recycle it. That's not what we really need. People need to start making their choices at the point of purchase. That's why a reusable bag is important, that you're not using anything that uses any sort of natural resources, fossil fuel, or paper, or wood pulp. Thinking that something's recycled is not, or can be recycled is not the answer. We shouldn't think that way.
well, but David, you could also say that these bags have to be created. These recyclable, this bag has to be created,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
And this bag actually is 11, it saves 11 of these bags,
Mhm.
okay? So it's not,
But
this
that
is,
bag's not used once.
right,
Right, so
Right.
many, many times,
Right.
but eventually, that will end up in a very similar disposition as these bags.
it will. So, we need to get our stuff out of the store, okay? Or we could just never buy anything. That's probably my husband's idea, but, okay, so we understand the concept, okay? So if you look at this other side of the column, you'll see that who charges and how much they charge. And it can vary, obviously, between 5 and 20 cents. I think actually Alaska might have one municipality that charges 50 cents. So in my research, I think found the number 56% of the ordinances have some sort of a fee attached. So it's not as if everyone does. So what I'm saying is, one way to look at this and try to help the most people is maybe don't do the 12, maybe do a 4 mil plastic bag. That will, I don't think grocery stores are gonna want to pay for something like this for groceries, right? So it'll solve the grocery problem, but it'll also help the smaller stores. What do you think?
CVS in Norwalk has already gone to, although they still have the single-use flimsy bag, they're already starting to roll out paper. Now, that doesn't solve the landfill issue, but they're already adjusting. I happen to think that, you know, maybe 12 mil is a bit excessive, but I think it's a hard one. I think we have to charge a fee. That's my vote. And I think that we have, I frankly don't have a problem with 12 mil. I think retailers will adjust. I think that it'll be an adjustment period. But I think that we have to be cognizant of their existing supply, how long it's going to take for them to change, and be sympathetic to that.
So I think the 12 mil minimum is designed to force retailers to not convert from thinner plastic to thicker plastic, but to force them to go from, to get rid of the plastic entirely and to either move to get, as David was saying, more reusable bags entirely, so you don't have something that you're giving out at the point of sale, or to go to paper, which is at least decomposable and you're not using fresh plastic. So while Monica, I do see your point, you're absolutely right that if 12, there's nobody else who does even 10. So it does feel like we're an outlier here, but it's definitely gonna have the policy effect of getting the plastic out of the waste stream, which I think is the goal. So although it is an outlier, you know, I guess I would, at least at a first pass, I would also stick with the 12, because that is gonna force the behavioral change, and that's a way that doesn't impact the consumer, it impacts the retailer in their kind of logistical planning.
Okay, I'm just gonna show one last thing. So this is a recyclable and recycled plastic bag from Stop and Shop. I think it costs 10 cents, I'm not sure. I don't even know where I got this, but anyhow, this is a 3 mil. So this would not, if we did a 4, this would not be allowed, okay?
To give that away. Or to-
Yes, you couldn't,
Yeah, they charge for that.
and you couldn't give it away or charge for it, right? And you couldn't use this either, because this is a 2, okay?
Interesting, you should, it would be interesting to go into Westport's grocery stores just to see if they're offering those plastic bags at the 4 mil. Only because I remember hearing that one of the testimonies from BYOB saying that's what they've done. It's like a
That's what
runaround.
they've done that. I've
Yeah,
actually
so
done
it didn't actually end up,
Didn't have the effect. they
didn't
wanted.
have the effect on the grocers,
Right.
which are the ones that are, you know, really truly.
But that's because Westport is a 2 1/4.
Right.
I'm not even considering a 2 1/4. Even though that's, a lot of states are, I don't see how that would.
And how are all the retailers handling a 10 mil in Greenwich?
Don't know.
That would be interesting to just, you know, again, see what, like, how are the smaller retailers handling it?
I don't
You know,
even
maybe
know.
like, you know, checking with the Chamber of Commerce over there or something, just to
You
say.
wanna do
Sure.
that? Okay.
Just to see like how.
Ask a question.
Yeah, right.
Who wants to go shopping in
But
Greenwich?
it's,
I actually just drove by, I should just
Yeah.
get out there and done my research.
But Lizzie, it might not have, it still might be in
It's pretty
the
new.
effective date might not have kicked in yet.
Can't
It might kick in like June, so.
You've had your hand up, go ahead.
One of the things is like when we're discussing whether to go with 4 mil or 12 mil, my argument would be that what we are seeing nationwide is a big push to be more environmentally sensitive, and it's not recycle versus recyclable conversation, but again, taking plastics out completely. I feel we have a way of coming, and what retailers most worry about, small businesses especially, is change every so often. It's almost like a Band-Aid. You do it once, you change behavior, but even for us, like if we are not used to, I mean, it'll take us all time to start carrying our bags and bringing it. But if we have a Band-Aid and then we have another one, it almost becomes like, more painful than just do it for once and be done with it. And the 12 mil, I mean, to the points, like, I think we should just go the whole route, because it'll also get the state to, while they're looking at some of the regulations, they're gonna look at why people have done it. And I think we can actually make a meaningful change rather than just taking away the, the ones that we find in the water, because my biggest concern would be about the microplastics that are showing up in the environment, and the only way we can change behavior is to take away.
Right, but you saw that there are
Yeah.
24 states on here that have some sort of a bag ban, okay?
No, I get
Okay.
that.
Because you came in later, so I didn't know if you
Yeah.
saw this sheet, okay?
Yeah.
I think if we're going to go with a 12 mil, and by the way, the other column I would put in here is the paper allowable, and maybe what the restriction, each of the sort of restrictions that we have.
That is the next column.
Yeah, it's
Paper
But paper
requirements.
requirements, but I mean,
Okay, so on the
What-
back is the definition of the.
no,
paper
I saw that, but I guess my point is that if we're going to go to a 12 or 10 or something to the extreme relative to what you have listed here, by the way, thank you for doing all this research. I think we have to be, maybe we have a longer rollout period,
Right,
a more of an adaption, a longer adaption period
okay,
to sort of prepare both sides of the transaction for what's coming. And just the preparation and all the discussion, I completely agree with Opita. I think if you slice the salami one slice at a time, it's not gonna have the impact as, hey, on X date, 18 months from now, or pick whatever date it is, that's when the hammer comes down, we all have to have converted. I think that's more meaningful, and I think it actually has a bigger impact, and actually, the longer the rollout period, people will start to adapt. The state may have reacted by then, not holding my breath. And so it gives us a breathing room, and it also gives us the opportunity to actually make a statement to a lot of people.
Terry, what do you
But
think?
again, could we phase it by size? So again, our rollout date was January 1st, 2020, or 6 months after passage, whichever is later, right? And we said that as a blanket. And if we say, okay, and to your point, again, enforcement is tough, right? But if we say whether it's by sales volume, or by transaction count, or by bag usage, or whatever it is, right? And we say below a certain threshold, you have an extra year to prepare. That gives you the 18 months that you just described, right? Again, for the large ones with the grocery stores, they're mostly chains. They're going to be able to comply. It's not that it's going to necessarily be easy, but this is just a cost of doing business for them, and I'm not that concerned about Stop and Shop. I am concerned about the Helen Ainsons and the shoe repairs and
Yeah.
the smaller folks, right? But if you give them an extra year to burn off that inventory and to comply with the rules and to anticipate whatever the state's gonna do, I think that really achieves a lot of the effects that we wanted to say. And the question is, how do we decide what the dividing line is between big and small? Big would have to comply on our original timetable, and small gets an extra year.
Well, I read
Okay, so-
one of these states had it saying if it was done by number of employees
Right,
in the
So-
business.
so this sheet that maybe you, didn't print out, the second thing, okay, this is a sheet that I went through many different ordinances and found different clauses to tackle this. So, for instance, this one pops out at me. Alaska has, in their ordinance, inventories of plastic shopping bags purchased before the date of enactment of this ordinance may continue to be used by sellers and provided to customers until all such inventories are completely used in the course of regular business operations, after a certain date. Sellers providing plastic bags under this exception after January 1st must be willing and able to provide documentation that such plastic bags were purchased on or before the date of enactment of this ordinance. So that would be one way to tackle it. Another way is looking at, California does it by gross annual sales. Obviously, 2 million is, because it's a big state, big numbers. Other states do it by 10,000 square feet is for one group, and 20,000 is for another. So we could do it by size of the store, we could do it by the number of bags they use, we could extend the timeline completely. I would say that in my, walking around, that I think an additional year would go a long way for the smaller stores, and we could put it in there, something to the effect of if you have the bags already on hand, if they were purchased before the enactment.
Well, I think if you're gonna go down this road, square footage is the only thing that makes the most sense, because it's, every store, that's listed, I have to believe, the retailers or their landlords are gonna know what the square footage is. The brokers are all gonna know in town, it's gonna be something people can't fudge.
Public record,
Right, and it's
Right.
much easier than
Gross
trying to
sales.
count bags or how many employees, because employees come and go.
right,
Square footage doesn't change,
right.
so,
Well, gross reported sales in the prior fiscal year would also be
but where are you gonna find that for a privately held business?
make a disclosure, right?
No, you
Yeah.
can't be a
No,
business.
it's
there.
not.
I don't mean publicly, but I mean.
No.
They're not gonna-
Once it
We'll
gets
just
reported-
we'll tell town hall, but we won't tell anybody
Alright,
else.
so-
Once it gets reported to the town, it's FOIA-able, so.
Okay, so withdrawn. So then, do we know what the square footage is of the sports shop, which is the largest one that you?
Yeah, we can get it.
Or Brooks Brothers.
They can self-report. And it's
Okay.
verifiable.
So what is-
Right, but we have to, but then we have to.
I bet
Yeah,
David
we
Genovese
need
knows
to
the square
determine what
footage of
the
every
tiers
building in
are.
this town.
Exactly.
I think there's only 2 tiers, there's big and small, and we're,
Right, but
we're
what
trying to
defines
figure out
big
the
and
divide.
what defines small,
So big is above a certain square footage and below.
which is,
So that's what I'm trying to
Well, that's
ask.
what we're trying to
Trying
define.
to ask is.
So if you're
we're
below it, you would have an extra year.
Correct. Correct.
I mean, you wanna know what CVS is, you wanna know what Walgreens is, even though Walgreens seems like it's only gonna be here for another 6 months, according to
Yeah.
Jeremy.
Yeah.
present day.
Right, but, I mean, I think we need to take some sort of census of what those stores are in this town that, we think are, important sources of bags, and use that as our benchmark,
Okay,
which is something
So-
we're not gonna be able to do here tonight.
so what I'm hearing is we wanna give an extension to smaller stores, is that what I'm hearing, right?
Yeah,
And
the only
especially
thing,
if they
That's right,
bought it in
structure.
advance, I
Yes.
think, I like the clause that says that if you bought the bags. Because what that does is, even if like one of the, slightly bigger store, or by volume, not by square footage, slips through this, distinction that we are creating, the fact is if they're using a lot more volume, then they can't buy more bags they have to go and get the regular bag. I don't know how we would enforce that either,
Okay, so,
but that's,
so another way to just not even have to worry about the enforcement is just do a blanket 1/1/20 it starts, and 1/1/21 you get a grace period to use up your supply.
yeah.
So,
And not do it by
But-
size of store.
or not do it by size of store, because I was gonna say this, if I were the sports shop, I would be not happy, because they are gonna be on the bigger
They-
end.
They just like 2 weeks ago placed.
They're on the, they're on their bigger end,
They don't
and
want
they
our
do
team
it,
meetings?
yeah.
And they're still gonna have a problem with the Christmas bags, because, this isn't gonna go into perpetuity, so.
But they're gonna get hammered by the state no matter what happens.
Yeah.
Right.
The state passes.
And you know what, I think the sports shop, the 10 cents was actually my takeaway, that was more of a problem, but, okay, so how do we feel about,
Then getting a recycled bag.
right, I
we
think that,
could do that.
they'll start working on that, but this will give them a chance to use up what they have, instead of taking a dump truck and dumping it all into the garbage, the
Mhm.
current bags, which doesn't help anybody, right?
Mhm.
Because then you're basically using 2 bags. So how does everybody feel about a 1/1 start with a grace period of 1 year to use up your current supply? And just depending upon the kindness of retail, that they'll do the right thing.
Yeah, I like that. I'm good with that, because at some point I feel that if we are saying that we want to bring change, we have to trust our retailers to want to be part of this change. I don't know, maybe it's a little, it's not raised eyebrow there.
So,
I'm just thinking the big box retailers, I mean, what's the incentive for them to comply
No, but
on
you use up the
this?
remaining.
yeah, but hang on, we don't have any big box.
Yeah, we don't have a
Well,
town.
I'm just
Well,
thinking, yeah, the big grocery stores
Stop
and
and
But,
shop.
well, but I guess
drugstores.
I was trying to, again, slice this in a slightly different way. Can we distinguish between the, again, we're trying to help the small businesses that are basically sole proprietorships in town, right? So can we say that there's one rule, that the delay is allowable for businesses that are not part of kind of a larger
Yeah.
regional chain?
Oh, yeah, I like
Chain.
that.
Like if
Yeah.
you're organized as a
That's
sole
great, yeah.
proprietorship or as a partnership, or,
Yeah.
like, if there's
I like
only
that,
one of
yeah.
your store, then you have more time. But if you are a Stop and Shop, a Whole Foods, a
If you're a
CVS, a Walgreens, if you're part of a chain, right, then
And
you have,
franchise, I think, is the word they use.
okay,
Yeah.
so
That is sometimes done.
I don't
in
know,
one
I don't
of
know if we
these
can
somewhere.
distinguish on that basis, but I'm more comfortable with that, because then we don't have to worry about measuring square feet. We can say, look, Helen Ainson, you're a sole proprietorship, or you're whatever, again, I don't wanna presume about how they're
Sole
legally
location.
organized.
Yeah,
But, you know, but they, I mean,
That's
how they're
sometimes,
organized.
that's sometimes how it is if there's one
Yeah.
location. If you look, there are several different options in here, but,
Is that an option, like, based on?
I saw that, yes,
Yeah.
somewhere.
Because again, we're trying to reward, or we're trying to give it a, again, I think the overall goal, is, as you said, is to get the plastic and to get people to bring their own, and get the consumables out of the waste stream, right? But, you know, again, as we're trying to change behavior, you know, if we're letting the small, if we define small businesses as a business that has just one instance of itself. I don't know, Monica, if you could point us to the wording that would help
I'm
us.
looking to see if it's in one of
I think
these.
that works,
Yeah.
I think that works.
yeah.
And I think maybe the other components, like, slightly, is to have, recognize those businesses that opt, in some way, that opt to, change ahead of time. You know, have BYOB put an award in their front window saying, you know, adopted BYOB, you know, or something along those lines, to encourage
It's not in
and,
here, but I
and,
did see that
and
somewhere.
to applaud those that have changed ahead of time.
Okay, so,
More carrot, less stick.
Yeah.
Right.
okay, so,
So I guess I would suggest that, again, I think it sounds like I haven't heard anybody dissenting from the idea of the overall ordinance as of 1/1/20, we want to give an extension for an extra year to certain smaller businesses that are expressing challenges. And the challenge, what we're as a group struggling with right now is how to define who gets that extension.
Well, what about when, like, to take your, kind of marry the two, say, you know, franchise players have to adopt. Sole proprietors get a year to use up their supply. However, let's offer a carrot. If there's early adoption, you get X. What is that X? I don't know, but I'm just saying, could there be a carrot?
I don't think you need
Well,
to
like I
change
said,
that.
that
I think
X
that's, I think that's just, we're just.
Special recognition.
We're getting
Special
way too
recognition,
involved,
yeah.
and you know what, the reality is
Kudos.
that the next time they order, they're gonna order,
Yeah,
Something.
Yes.
they're
Right.
gonna order a
That's the point.
compliant
Fair
bag.
enough.
We don't need to micromanage, I think
Okay.
they got the picture.
so
So,
BYOB can go and put their plaques, but that's not part of our ordinance,
Right.
that's
No,
something
that's not part of our job.
separate.
Rather than define all these categories, why not have an ordinance that is effective at the end of this year, and everyone has a year to implement it? And the advantage of this is, when the ordinance is passed, now there's certainty to the businesses, small and large, what the ordinance says. Which
So the
we
only thing
don't
is-
have now. So it's gonna be either 4 mil, 12 mil, whatever. And they all then have a year. And then you don't get into all these
Yeah.
distinctions of square footage corporations, proprietorships, chains. And they all have the message, it's coming in a year, and here is the ordinance that defines what it is.
Yeah.
But the
And
problem with that, though, sorry, the problem with that is that you're gonna get the Stop and Shops and the
Mhm.
single purpose flimsy bag that ends up in, you got another couple of million bags
Right.
getting
Yeah,
issued.
But still, it's a year, and then it gets implemented. We've had 50 years
We don't need
of
to
the
do that.
other.
I don't think we
But
need to
why-
wait a year.
why-
These
why
are
wait
big
another
chains,
They can
they
change
see
in a
this
month.
coming,
They're
as I
ready
said,
to
CVS
Right.
in Norwalk, they're already changing,
They don't need a year.
they don't need a year.
Yeah,
I mean,
so, but,
Right, but
but,
can you really enforce an ordinance that says, okay, for you guys, this has to be done like soon?
Yeah.
But for you other people, no, you get a grace period.
Yes.
Yeah,
I mean,
you
can
can
that
enforce it.
legally be
Yes.
done?
you can,
Okay.
yeah, it is done. But I think to Dick's point that, and what you're seeing at CBS already is that they will move along with this. I don't think that they're going to wait until December of, 2020 to kick it into gear and get there.
I mean, they're already
Correct.
doing it, because the
Yeah.
surrounding towns
Oh,
have
I
it.
think they'll push it off as long as they can.
But they don't have to comply, they won't.
Yes.
Right.
The,
You know, because this is their bottom line.
The
And They're,
chains.
they're there to benefit their stockholders, and their stockholders, there's more financial benefit to the stores by using these single-use bags. Otherwise, they would have stopped using them long ago.
that's true.
Well,
So,
there is and there isn't. If people end up bringing their own bags, then the store could theoretically save all of that money. So I don't.
but if we defer enforcement for a year, I think it defeats the purpose of the ordinance to some extent. I just don't
And
think.
it also, I feel it puts the burden back on the small business, because if I'm a small grocery store competing with Stop and Shop doesn't care, if they have like 1 million bags that they're buying, and if they don't use 200,000 of those bags, they can just send it to another store where they can use it. Meanwhile, I'm charging my customers 10 cents to give them a bag, because I can't place in that kind of volume orders. So I think then the pendulum shifts back and hits the small business again, and we're trying to take that pain away by saying, let the small business finish their bags, let the big businesses start, and there's still 6 months' time that we are giving them, so, I mean, I think 6 months is plenty time for a large business.
Well, there are ordinances that out there, I don't have them in this sheet right here, but that do this. They do separate it by size, they separate it by square footage, or they separate it by, sales. So it is done. I agree that it's, more complicated, but it has happened.
Let me complicate it one step further.
Uh-oh.
No,
What if we adopt on 1/1/20 and immediately impose the 10-cent charge on bags issued? And a year later, the bags can, then the phase-in of the 12 mil.
well, that, I thought, that is what we're doing. The 10-cent charge comes in after 6 months. That's not
No, I think
changing.
what Patrick is saying, to finish up your inventory, so if Helen Ensign is using a bag from the previous inventory, then,
Right.
so it's a hybrid situation where they can still continue to use the bag, but they have to charge the 10 cent.
I think we're getting back to your Band-Aid suggestion
Yeah.
point now, like, I think it's either on or
It's
it's
an
off,
adoption period.
right? If the ordinance is in place, and it applies to you, then here's one set of rules. And if it's not yet, if you don't yet have to adopt it, then you can do whatever you want as you can today.
Well, again, we're trying to encourage changing behavior.
Yeah.
And so, if you immediately impose the fee, you're starting to, you're recognizing that people have stocks of bags that they want to exhaust. Fine. You can continue to exhaust those until the 12 mil takes effect. But in the meantime, starting at the adoption of whatever period ahead of that later adoption period for the 12 mil thickness, it's 10 cents a bag,
Plastic or paper.
plastic or paper.
Okay, well, that I haven't seen. The fee has been on paper, and the concept is eventually get people not to use any plastic and then the paper becomes cost prohibitive. I've never seen a fee on the plastic.
No, and I think
as
what we've
well.
heard in the public hearing is people want plastic stopped now.
Yeah.
You know, so
Right, and I agree,
don't s-
David, that people want that, but I am also cognizant of what businesses need. And I don't wanna be business unfriendly.
But that's business friendly, actually, because you're actually, other than the sports shop that doesn't wanna charge a fee, that's a different issue.
It is.
They don't care what the ordinance says, they don't wanna charge a fee, or anybody else that feels the same way. But if you're charging a fee, even though they're exhausting their existing bags, it's actually business friendly, because they're actually now getting a fee for their bags. Before they've even had to buy the more expensive bags.
Okay,
Because that's sort of trying to get people to change behavior.
yeah, it's more fair.
But it keeps the plastic in use for an additional year.
No, but what Patrick is saying, it's for the stores, it's not for the larger stores, it's only for the stores that we are allowing that extra year. So if Helen Hansen has 5,000 bags to use, we are saying they have a year to use that bag, but while they are using the bag, they would still have to collect the 10-cent charge.
So we still need to find a way to distinguish the smaller stores. Okay.
Yeah.
Or the larger stores,
Right.
yes.
Right.
I mean, it should be stricter for the larger stores.
Okay. No, I see
And
what
the
you're
reason
saying.
why I like that is because as a consumer, if I go out, I know whether I shop at Helen Hansen or I go to Whole Foods or I go to any supermarket or any place, it's the same 10 cent starting from the first. And then, when I came in, you mentioned the whole shifting the burden to the consumer as well, not just on the shop owner. I think that does shift the burden to the consumer to kind of get into that pattern starting from the 1st of 2020, January, and then we have a year for the shop owners, so
We haven't
kind
gotten
of
any pushback from really,
consumers. No,
to speak of from consumers.
and that's what I'm saying, so what you said is like, I'm agreeing with you, is that then the 1st of Jan 2020 is when the charge hits the consumers, whether the retailers are using their old bags or not. The retailers have a year to phase it out, but we are paying 10 cents then.
So we're back to the question of how do we distinguish the, large use, single-use bag stores versus the smaller, sole proprietorships or single stores here, the smaller merchants that need some additional help. So what are we looking at?
That's an easy
Square
decision.
footage?
I mean, we just, either square footage or,
Or s-
Or national franchise,
I think-
or regional
I
franchise.
think you go by
Regional.
franchise.
Yeah.
Or
Regional
if not
franchise.
franchise, but single
Multiple
location,
locations.
multiple location.
For what's multiple, what if you have like a Sarah Campbell in New Canaan that has maybe 20 stores around, the
Yeah, that's
country?
multiple.
That's
It's
multiple.
multiple, but it's, still smallish.
No, but
I don't think they're using the flimsy bags.
That's not,
Maybe four.
Yeah, at somebody's gonna find it not fair, however we dice it.
I
So,
still
like-
go back to the toughest question, is the enforcement. Who's gonna sit there
Okay,
and
I
go
got
through
that.
all?
I got that covered.
All right,
Yeah, I
well,
got that covered.
what do we have then?
Well,
'Cause
should
that's-
we,
Yes.
should we
Yes, let's
figure this out
figure-
first?
Yeah, I think,
figure this out.
I think, shouldn't we decide what we wanna do in terms of distinguishing large versus
Yes,
small
that's
stores?
what we're still on this.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanna
So
convert,
like, the, what
Monica,
stores I'm thinking of,
You've seen language in some legislation that was able to distinguish
I've,
between,
it's
Single
something
instance.
about franchise, something about, more than one store. Yeah, I did see that. I don't know which state, but I will
Okay.
be happy to research that.
if you wanna point me in the direction, I'm glad to do that too. Again, we can't discuss it until we call another meeting,
Right.
but I would love to, I think as a sense of the group, we're trying to distinguish between large versus small.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
By large, I think we as a group are meaning those stores that have a
Non-chain stores.
regional or a national footprint or chain stores, right?
Yeah.
And we wanna specifically put on the small side, what we think of as sole proprietorships, no matter how they're legally organized, the individual one-off stores. So I think that's our goal,
Right.
right?
So I can send you this website, and you can go on there and you can see all of the different towns
Great.
in a state, and then you can go into the link and
So-
you can look at each ordinance.
So do that, I'm glad to do that, and if you have
Okay.
any recollection of where you saw that
Yeah.
language,
Yeah,
that would be helpful.
yeah, yeah,
But let's try and find that, because I think if that's our
Is
But
that,
read gold.
does everybody agree with that?
I think that's
Because-
very
Yes.
business friendly. I think that, I'd be curious to hear what the chamber would say about it.
And so I think just to come up with, and with your point, right, that we're saying that for all the stores regardless of size, the 10 cent per point of sale bag starts 1/120.
Yes.
But for businesses that we are gonna deem small, the changeover from plastic to paper is deferred until 1/121. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
No. You're saying defer.
Recycled paper.
Recycle, just I
So,
think,
so the commencement date for all the provisions of the ordinance for the large businesses start January 1st, 20.
right,
That's the fee, the 12 mil thickness minimum for any plastic stuff, that's the recyclable paper as substitute, all that stuff all starts on 1/120,
right.
right? For a business that we're gonna define as small, right? The only thing that's getting deferred is
It's not
the
deferred, they are getting another year off.
It's deferred.
The only thing that, the enforcement, the enforcement commencement date is gonna be deferred for a year until 1/121,
Mhm.
only on the requirement to have, paper, recycled paper content for the bags. That is, they can burn off their plastic
Yes.
in the balance in the year 2020.
Well, of plastic or non-conforming paper.
Right. Yeah, oh, yeah, correct. So,
Okay.
That's easy.
So, I mean, so I think that is actually, that's certainly a compromise that I think is business friendly, certainly I can support that. And then what's left to us then is to wrangle out the specifics of how we're gonna define large versus small. But other than that, I think the ordinance as it's been written, more or less stands.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think, I mean, I could support that, I mean, I don't know if I need to make a motion to make
No,
a
not yet.
modification or,
No, I
Well,
think
we
it's
have to get
what-
to enforcement.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Um,
but I wanna get to that kind of point, that's, I think, an important kind of agreement point, because I see everyone nodding, I don't see anybody yelling.
No, I agree.
What
I have no
about
objection
that?
in the principle of
Let's
what
wait
you're
for
saying,
finance.
but once that grace period, or whatever we're calling it, deferment period is over,
Mm-hmm.
if the retailer continues to have a form of a plastic bag, it must be at least 12 mil or greater in thickness, is that
Mhm.
correct?
Yes,
Yes.
or
And
made out
everybody's
of,
comfortable with that, regardless of the fact that your analysis shows that
Right.
many states across the country are nowhere near that number.
But what we're gonna do is we're going to ask them to use recycled bags, recycled paper. So we're,
If they want to use, if they
recycled,
want to use plastic,
recycled,
it needs to be 12 mil.
and if they
If
want,
otherwise, they can go to recyclable paper, or
Re-
according to the
recycled paper.
definition.
Yeah, from the
Recyclable or
original,
recycled?
But
Well,
recycled,
recycled, so
Recycled.
so that, like, this in the original form has been watered down, because that that paper bag
right,
had all sorts of other
Right.
stipulations in it, and now it just went straight to recyclable.
recycled,
Recyclable.
Recyclable.
Recycled.
recycled,
Recycled, not
recycled.
recyclable. Recyclable, all paper is recyclable.
No, I'm sorry, recyclable,
It is recyclable,
Recyclable.
it's new, it's virgin paper,
right,
it's not recycled.
No, there has to be 40% has to be from recycled material.
I did not see that in here.
okay, that was
that's
changed.
what's in there before.
That was in there
Yes.
before, I think it's gone now.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's gone.
I don't like the idea of virgin paper. I mean, again, it's
Yeah,
like
it's
that whole
gone.
like tiered system,
it's
I
right.
feel it's like cutting
no,
it
it
10
was
different ways.
changed,
It was
it
changed.
was
So
changed
here,
by
in
the
the
other
ordinance,
committees.
here, on page 4, section 2.11,
Yep.
recycled paper checkout bag means the bag is 100% recyclable.
Recyclable.
It doesn't
That's
say
it.
anything about
Forty percent
the
content.
Yeah.
content of the manufactured
Yeah.
source material.
Right, so the merchants should be happy about that.
Yes.
Toy store
and you-
guy
And you'll
should be
see
happy
on the
about that.
front page, it says additional changes in this ordinance include the simplification of the definition
I
of
don't
a
do that.
recycled paper checkout.
I don't agree with that.
Okay,
Personally, I don't agree with that.
okay. So, does anyone else have anything
I
to say?
don't agree with that either, because again, we are not changing behavior, and our carbon footprint is not changing.
I agree with Patrick and Arpita.
Okay,
I think we should go back to the previous definition.
Yeah.
I was fine with 40% recycled, that the
I
that
could
the
forward
composition of the bag material, the paper material to make the bag is 40% from
The
Recycle.
term is
Recycled or-
post-consumer
Post-consumer, thank you.
recycled material.
Materials, yes.
Yeah.
So it can be paper, it can be rice, it can be whatever it is.
Okay, but that goes back to this case, you guys, where
Yeah,
the shoe guy is gonna go from paying 4.4 cents a bag to somewhere around this, obviously not this bag, but this is 48 cents, so let's call it 35 cents. So, and a lot of these small stores use paper, and, we're going to ask them to find a brand new source to do this more complicated paper, and that's gonna be places like, the Uncle's Deli. and-
Yeah, all the
You're gonna
takeout
have
joints
to do
are
it
gonna
now.
like get hit hard on this one.
Yep,
And they'll have a year and a half to do
They
it.
have a year to do it.
They have an
Proposal
extra-
that
we
is
just gave
not
an extra year.
enforceable.
Hopefully in the year and a half, there'll be
2021.
more people supplying these bags too, and if the state comes down with the legislation, and we've just done all of this, and then the state takes stuff, I mean, it's double whammy
okay,
again.
but we can't worry about the state, okay, cause
So-
that's, who knows what's
But I think that's
happen.
important, right, because we are giving them an extra year to comply with what we're saying here, in the expectation that the state may supersede us, so we're not gonna force them, we're, I think, in generosity, we're not forcing them to apply one set of rules on January 1st of 2020, and then deal with something else some other time in 2020 or 2021. We're deliberately giving them an extra year to comply, to burn off the inventory, and so that they don't get two different sets of competing regulations. So I think it's actually quite fair of us.
Mhm.
I mean, personally, sentimentally, I agree with you guys that the 40% feels better. And, I guess I'm wondering how much of how much
It's
of
a
an impact
carbon
it
footprint
makes.
conversation, right, because the argument is paper is not, I mean, I'm not equating paper and plastic, I will never do that. I'd rather have all plastic done and we have paper with the bigger carbon footprint. But again, if we are trying to make a statement, if we are trying to change behavior, if those are our goals and expectations, then replacing it with paper with the same or greater carbon footprint doesn't, it's like half measure again. So,
Right. So then the
Well,
flip
I
side
mean-
is the shoe guy, how many bags does the shoe guy use a year?
I'd be more interested about, takeout. What do they get?
Well, that's an interesting point, because some of these ordinances, just focus on food. And in an establishment that does no more than 15% or more of its sales are food, they're subject to this ordinance, and otherwise they're not.
Yeah, think about it, I mean, what takeout do you get that ever comes in a paper bag or a plastic, whatever?
Pizza.
I wanna
Pizza.
say,
Pizza, yeah, put it in a pizza box.
yeah, I wanna say off the top of my head, he uses, I don't know what the sheet is, 300 of the paper, and 200 of the plastic. Oh, here we go. He has 1,000 in inventory, he uses about 320 of the paper a month and about 200 of the plastic a month.
he has a year and a half.
So 320,
I mean, technically, he has here 10 months.
He's doing about 4,000
so he's got
baggable
4,000.
events.
Yeah, so he's got about 4,000 paper bags per year. He's gonna be charged an additional 25 cents per bag, so it's $1,000. I don't mean to be flip, but I mean.
It makes a big, have you
It
ever
does
been in
make a
there?
difference.
It makes a
That's a
big
lot of money.
difference.
I
Well, remember,
understand.
he's getting a dime for every bag, so it's not, I mean,
Just he's recouping $400.
Yes,
Right.
he also does.
Is there anything to prevent a retailer from charging more for a bag?
No, you can charge more.
Yeah.
The only thing I've seen is one state has you can't charge more than the actual cost of the bag. But obviously stores aren't gonna go crazy, because then,
Well, it's a competitive point.
yeah, right, so that, yeah.
Not to bring up this date again, but, if I were a real retailer and I was given a year, knowing that potentially the state legislation can come down, I might hedge my bets thinking that whatever's gonna come down from the state's gonna be pretty watered down. I would think,
It's actually gonna be worse.
Oh, it
It'll be
is?
more strict,
you
yes.
think okay, so that's a question ahead, do you think it's gonna be worse?
Have you been to Hartford?
I haven't seen much come out of it, but, so.
well, remember, they're gonna be subject to a lot of lobbying efforts from the plastics industry, from this big stores, so I don't know that we can predict that it's gonna be worse or
No,
better.
I thought I sent you, didn't I send you the state thing? Yeah, that's a consortium of the grocery stores, the environmentalists, they all see this coming, and so
Yeah.
what they wanna do is have something consistent over
Right, right.
across the state,
So, okay.
But there are lots of states that have this in the hopper. But I did ask Wayne where that stands, and he said that in about a month, all of these bills either will be dead or they'll have moved out of committee. And so we'll know in about a month. So, so let's move on. So Frank is going to look for the wording, but what we wanna do is start the 10-cent charge on 1/1 for any kind of bag that you give out. And let you use up your supply for a year. Is that the bottom line? Is that what
For
we're
the
doing?
smaller.
Right.
For the small only, and again, that's the intent, but we're not saying anything in the legislation about using up supply. We're just saying you have a year extra
Right.
to do whatever you want, and if you're giving out bags at checkout, you have to, or at point of sale, you have to charge 10 cents per bag.
Okay.
Right.
Even if it happens to be a plastic.
But we're saying, correct, but we're saying that they could even buy a plastic bag in November of 2020 and give it out in December of 2020, and that would be fine with us, because that's within their time. I just think
But why aren't we
it's
saying?
I think it's just overly complicating things to start asking them to also document when they bought the bag. You
It's
know.
impossible.
It's not business friendly.
Yeah,
It's
so
impossible.
Why-
Who's gonna go around?
Wait,
and
why
check
do
all
they have to document when they bought it?
under what we just described, they don't. But
Right.
again, I'm just
That was
noting that
that was a
Monica's
discussion.
comment was that this is to allow them to burn off their supply.
No,
And
we
there's
don't.
nothing in the legislation,
No.
there's nothing we're proposing in the legislation about when they bought the bag. They can buy and sell whatever bags they want, right up until New Year's Eve of 2020.
Just a matter of what they can issue.
But it's what they can give out, correct?
Okay.
And again, I just wanna be clear, we're saying that the entire ordinance applies to all the large stores as of January 1st of 2020, and the entire ordinance applies to the small stores at the same time, except for the requirement that the point of sale bags be made of paper,
Correct.
right? So everything else applies.
The
as far as
10-cent charge
The
goes
10-cent
in,
charge, right.
goes in on 1/1/20,
Right,
and then.
so, but, so if the, lost my words, if the sport shop says, screw that, I'm not charging a 10-cent fee, right? In February of 2020, they're gonna get charged, they're in violation, right? Even if they're still allowed to give out the plastic bags, they've
Correct.
got to be charging that fee
Correct.
Mhm.
on the consumer receipt in a way that, right? I mean, that's what we're saying.
I think
Correct.
that's
So I just
very
wanna make
fair.
sure that we're aligned.
And then 2021, we want all bags compliant.
Correct.
Correct.
So again, I'm not trying to dictate, I just wanna make sure I'm reflecting the sense of what we're talking about.
Yes. What do you think, Tim?
I'm still in my original position, that you're giving everyone certainty when you pass the ordinance. They then, because of certainty, they now know this is the ordinance, during the year, they shouldn't be ordering more inventory. Because that's been the problem, you talked to Helen Ansel, she's gotta order. Now when you have the ordinance and they all know this is the ordinance, they stop ordering future inventory. And to me, a year, I mean, we've had plastic bags for 50 years, so a year to me is not an insurmountable amount of time. I don't view that this change of behavior is instant. When you pass the ordinance, the merchants all now know what the ordinance is. They have a year to do it. And then if they don't do it at the end of the year, then you have enforcement.
And what we really wanna do is we want the consumers to change their behavior, so they don't even,
Ask for that.
they could just do this on their own without even having the ordinance.
My
That's
wife
what I
has
think.
bags from Wegmans, and when she goes to Wegmans or supermarket, she brings her bags in. So it's an education that's gonna start. But once you pass the ordinance, then the education really starts.
It's gonna focus the mind.
Yeah, the focus more. That's how
Although-
I view it.
What we heard was that nothing really actually does change behavior as effectively as the charge. Right. So like, you can educate all you want, we've been educated for years. And it's not necessarily like, you know, I think, you know, a hit to your bottom line, that's the problem. It's like, oh, it's just a reminder. You know, oh,
Yeah.
10 cents, like I shouldn't have done that, you know,
Right.
I'll get them next time. So, I don't know. I mean, while I agree with you that like education should happen, I just don't think it's,
That's not how people are wired.
But I'm also viewing it, you're making the passing of this ordinance simple now, because you've defined
Yeah.
the ordinance, and you've avoided all this definition of large businesses, small businesses, and you've put it in. So environmentally, you've made your change.
Right.
It's just gonna be a year later.
No,
And
we are
that's not
gonna
true.
define
No, because
large
for one
versus
year,
small.
large
Right.
business, again.
Yeah, but.
If you allow the large stores to continue to use plastic bags for another year, then environmentally, we haven't made the change.
Well,
We're still gonna have
and-
millions of extra plastic bags circulating through Darien that didn't need to happen.
But
And I
see,
think
that's
there
the
was good
point. I don't think
conversation
there's
last
that,
time.
I don't think, if you go down the beach in Darien, plastic bags aren't a problem here. You go other places,
they are.
and they are.
Yeah, they are,
But-
there are people
But
who are
there's not a
cleaning
lot
up.
of plastic bags down at the beach.
For our
here.
size beach, there are.
Yeah, but because there are people cleaning up, there's so many volunteers who also wrote to us and they talked about cleanups and so.
Okay, well, I don't have a problem with it being a year of enforcement. That's,
So I guess,
so that's my
I
position.
so
wouldn't be able to
So
support that.
respectfully, I mean, we had the conversation about enforcement phase-in last time,
Right.
and that's when we had a lengthy
Mhm.
go-around about, should it be 6 months, should it be first of the year, should it be a full year? And I think what we kind of coalesced on as a fair warning time was to say it's the first of the year for simplicity, or 6 months
6
after the
months.
passage,
Mhm.
whichever is later. Because we felt like 6 months was enough time for people for businesses to figure it out. So I still think that that's a reasonable position that we took as a group last time.
Mhm.
So I would stick with that if we can. And again, to further delay the phase-in of the conforming bag requirement by an additional year, like we've just described, I think it makes sense as, again, as a point of sympathy to the small businesses.
Well, I don't think you need the way the ordinance is drafted right now, it's effective January 1, 2020. There's no
There's no
6-month kick-in as based on when it gets enacted. And if we give this additional year grace period to the smaller stores, then I don't think we need
The 6 months.
the shorter or longer 6 months or January 20.
I think we just do January.
Yeah.
January
so just
2020,
for
yeah.
I think the
1 month.
expectation is this is gonna come up at either the April or the May meeting, is that right?
Right.
So as long as that
April or June.
happens,
No, but to
Well, even
David's
in
point,
June
it's like
it's-
even if it happens in August, the
nothing
large.
happens in August.
Even in September, the large
September, I
stores can deal
apologize.
with it.
The point is that they still have a year, 4 months. It's not like now we're just giving them 4 months. We're still giving the smaller retailers,
Right.
you know.
Okay.
And the smaller retailer was what we had pushed the 6 months last time for.
Right.
So now we are actually being very generous with the extra additional year for them.
So I'm fine then.
But meanwhile, the biggest thing was when we looked at the hearings or the emails, the conversation is about the bulk, you know, Stop and Shops and CVS, and the number of bags that they're giving out every week. So we stopped that and, you know, we let the small offenders continue for a year.
We get to enforcement.
Yes.
Okay. So are we in agreement on this?
Well, I would like to know, what's the definition, how are we defining big and small? So we can't
Right.
keep
We're-
saying big
okay.
or small, we have to have
We're
a
gonna defer
metric.
that, we're gonna defer that.
Yes, we're
So-
gonna,
so-
yes.
Until we
so-
do a little more research.
Okay.
So
Right.
we've
Perfect.
said that our intention is
I
that the
got it.
big ones is the chains, the
But that needs
franchise,
to be kind of
and the small
spelled
ones
Yeah.
is the
No, I
in
individual
some way, shape,
private.
or form, yes.
And so Monica's gonna send me
Yep.
the link to whatever the site is, I'm gonna do whatever research I can find, and I'm not gonna draft anything, I'm just gonna share the research with the group.
Yep.
And I assume we have another meeting scheduled, I'm trying to remember when our next one
Or
is,
you
a
know,
couple
you can
weeks.
share, because I think if we're all in agreement, share it with me and then I will get it I
Yes.
will get it
I'll
into
make
the
Monica
document.
yes,
So that we don't have to spend another
Yes,
day.
But that's our intention, right? I wanna make sure that we're aligned on the intention,
yes,
right? And of course, the wording matters, I'm not trying to gloss over that.
Yes.
But I wanna make sure that we're aligned.
yes.
Mhm.
Okay, so I will get that to you
Okay.
when I can locate that.
Okay.
before we move on to enforcement though, have we aligned on these, the language around recycled versus recyclable? I don't know if we got to, or did we?
The definition of paper.
A conforming bag is or is not 40% recycled post-consumer material.
I say it should be 40% post-consume, whatever, what was it, Roland?
Post-consumer recycled.
Yes. Go back to the old definition.
Right,
That's my vote.
Do you wanna make a motion?
I agree with that.
I think we have to have a motion, right?
What do you think?
Well, not really, I mean,
You
we're
just take a
still, we're
sense of
still
the meeting.
drafting.
Yeah,
it.
because we'll take a motion when
Okay.
we, for the next one, but I do wanna get a sense. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't have trouble with the recyclable paper. That,
Well, there's recyclable, and then there's recycled and recyclable. And it has to be 40%, and it has to have certain wording on it.
40% never bothered me.
Okay.
I mean, you know, that, to me,
Yeah.
was,
Okay, it didn't bother me until I went out and I talked to the stores.
okay.
And I realized that, Uncle's Deli and stores like that, it will be, and even just trying to find this company that sells this bag, this big company, they had 2 types of bags that were compliant. The rest of the bags were not compliant. So sourcing this isn't a walk in the park.
It's not that difficult.
Well, I just spent about 45 minutes on it, and it was more
I
difficult
didn't mean,
than you
I
might
didn't mean
have
that as a
thought.
judge, I didn't mean that as judgment.
Okay?
It,
But
for,
also
for,
like
for, prove her wrong. For,
Monica,
for
the
pe-
other thing is for
prove her wrong.
sandwiches, Uncle's Deli could
You
easily
won.
be wrapping it and giving, I mean, the whole idea is again, consumer behavior change. The US uses so much packaging, I mean, why do we need a bag to have our lunch sandwich to go and sit somewhere to have it? It could be wrapped properly, and that's the end of it. I mean, they save a lot of money by not even having to put any type of paper bag.
What
So I think
about a
some of this is
construction?
resistance to change, and somebody's gonna feel the pain somewhere, so if you.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm wondering is it really our responsibility to make the stores drive this when you could go into Uncle's Deli and you don't have to get the bag? And all of your friends and all of our friends, and we could all do that. But we don't.
Yeah,
But
and
then
then
So-
the other thing is that
The
like,
whole ordinance, we are driving it, right? I mean, the whole ordinance doesn't have to be done, we could just all stop, but that's not what we are here for. I think we are here to put an ordinance in place, and I think it's,
Yeah,
I
I guess
don't
when
know.
I'm talking to these businesses though, I
I get it.
realize that it's not up to them to change our behavior. It's actually our responsibility to
but that's what
change our
we're doing as a
behavior.
town, if we are saying, so we are the bad guys, right? This group here is one of the bad guys who's saying that we are going to enforce this. And the store owners are not just obeying our ordinance, otherwise they're gonna get fined. So we are the ones who are asking our town to change
Right,
behavior.
which is why I'm really cognizant of being as business friendly as we can.
Yeah,
Monica, let me just qualify my last statement. I didn't mean to suggest that, for people that know how and are responsible for sourcing their products, they know where to find this stuff.
Okay, you know what I'm gonna do? Is I'm gonna go to the shoe guy and I'm gonna help him get new bags, because I know he doesn't have the time to do this.
the other thing is that, what I question is that these small retailers or proprietors have very limited ways to advertise and market their own company. A lot of it is on their bags. So I see their point, around, look, you're now taking away one of my channels to market myself. I'm providing a recyclable bag. I'm conforming in that way. I don't know, I'm wavering on that extra. While I would love for it to be the 40%, I want it to be, I just do feel for the smaller retailers that what are they gonna all give out everything in a plain paper bag? I just can't see the toy
Yeah.
store wanting to do that. I don't necessarily, I think that Dairy and Sport Shop can handle it.
Right,
It's the other guys
Right.
that,
right.
so.
One way to adjust, to approach that would be to do a size restriction on the bags. So obviously a grocery store bag would be one size, and these smaller stores use the smaller bags. That's another way to look at it.
Enforcement?
Okay, well,
Well, are
so,
we in agreement on the
What was
40%?
conclusion on the-
yes,
No, we're not.
we're not in
split on it.
agreement.
Well, then let's get a sense of the meeting.
Let's just raise hands and who's in
So,
favor of what.
so I guess the question on the table is, if we were gonna put in a requirement that a conforming bag, no matter when your starting date starts, that a bag is only conforming if it includes 40% post-consumer recycled
paper
materials,
material,
in addition to being fully recyclable, who would support that addition to that ordinance, just as a sense of the meeting? So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hands raised, and 1, 2, 3, 4 not. Okay, so it's pretty evenly split. Okay, so,
And also, I would need more education on what can be done with the
I'll do some
post-recycle.
research on,
Yeah.
on, on
Yeah,
how
because I mean-
difficult it is, on how easy or how difficult it is to find these bags.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah, it's
know
not just a matter of availability, which is certainly a question, it's also a matter of cost,
Yeah.
okay?
Right, the toy store,
So,
was
Say-
telling me that that the two places that sell it are so busy that they're not taking new orders.
But it's also
So
like
I
a
don't
year,
know if
again,
that's-
it's almost a year,
They have an
10 months
extreme.
from now, and what we know is commercialization always works.
It's like organic eggs. Nobody
Exactly.
could find organic eggs for a long time because there were no farmers that were doing organic eggs. Now,
It's everywhere.
90% of eggs are organic.
Okay, but the other point is that this person is gonna go from 4 cents a bag to
He's got a year and a half.
whatever, 35
And the
And he's
cents.
right,
other
but I
point,
think-
the other
but we
point is
collect-
we
we need to
can,
make a decision based upon what we know today, okay? I don't think anybody can forecast 12 or 18 months from now what the hell the cost of a recycled bag is gonna be, okay? So we make a decision based on knowledge and facts that exist now,
Okay.
okay? That's my feeling on that issue, okay? You know,
Patrick's gonna give us some more knowledge and information.
I
on
will
that
do
in
some
the next meeting.
research on finding that, the appropriately defined bag.
Okay, okay. So we had, Terry had a big question. I know you're all waiting. The enforcement. Okay, I have good news, all right? So
change the pace.
okay, so yes, we're gonna segue right off of this. So the good news on the enforcement is that, we are looking at I thought I wrote it down, but it's, an environmental compliance officer.
Right.
And we met, Jamie, Frank, and Wayne and I met yesterday, and we are looking for first a volunteer. And if we can't get a volunteer, we're looking for, somebody in-house. And if that doesn't work, we might have to hire a part-time person. The volunteer, obviously the hired people will be able to write a citation, but the volunteer will also be able to write a citation. So one of the things that Jack Davis asked is, what's what's the additional cost going to be for this? And I talked to Kate, and it's negligible unless we hire somebody. And we don't know if we're gonna have to hire somebody, so we can't really, I don't know how to quantify that when we don't know. Does that answer your question, Terry? What is your?
if you have a volunteer, who do they report to and what are their responsibilities, their duties? Do they have a checklist, like we're gonna put out, okay, here whatever the fine schedule may be, whatever. So who do they report to and how does that get done?
Okay, so you wanna know who they report to?
Right, and who vets the volunteer, where do they come, like,
Okay,
They
well, if
report
they're-
to the Board of Selectmen.
so the Board of Selectmen would be the person in charge of this volunteer, so like a
Well,
commission?
they're in charge of all town, all
Yeah.
town
Commissions,
employees or
right. So
town
would
officials.
would it be part of a commission of one, I guess, where they appoint
As
this
the
person?
enforcement officer, I would think so. I mean, you're just going out to investigate complaints and see if there are violations and issue a citation. And if a citation happens, there's an environmental hearing compliance officer or a compliance hearing officer. There's a separate body or a person to hear appeals and hear, the other side of the story and decide whether the citation should stick. So it's a two-pronged process.
Right, so you have the volunteer who reports to the selectmen, right? And then if there was some violation, then it would go to the environmental protection person to issue this citation?
Environmental compliance hearing officer.
Okay, and we already have that in
No, no.
town, or?
The volunteer would be empowered to write a citation, and then there's a hearing officer to hear if they wanted,
If somebody wanted to.
if they wanted to
Right.
appeal it or debate it.
Okay,
And
But
they're a
to
town
your-
official appointed by the Board of Selectmen.
It's the Board of Selectmen's responsibility to come up with the internal structure on how this is going to work.
Right.
All right, good.
But I would just offer a cautionary note. And I remember that when we were going through the blight discussion, this was gonna be easy, we'll just have somebody in here go out and do it. And now it's turned into, it's, in my view, in some ways, government gone awry, in that it's just become much more complex than it probably ever should have.
Well, they had many more cases than they anticipated.
Well, because people are crazy about their property in this town,
And they,
and nothing generates more fights and more anger among neighbors than what
okay,
everyone does with their neighboring properties, so.
But the
we
point
should have
was, it's
anticipated
ended
that
up,
was
it's
gonna be a
ended up
controversial
costing,
word.
it
it's
has.
ended up costing the town a lot more than anybody anticipated. And I will predict that this will cost the town a lot more than we can sit here and try and conjure.
Yeah,
And so I think if we're going to pass this, to Jack's question, I think we need to come up with what a realistic estimate is going to be of cost. And I actually think the board, the F&B, should be able to come up with what that estimate should be.
okay.
I mean, that's my, I have no idea what the costs per individual, per FTE, you know, et cetera, what that's going to
Well,
be.
you have to estimate the number of citations that are gonna be issued, and I don't think you can do that until the ordinance is in place.
Mhm.
Well, I think we have to define what a citation is, first of all, because now we have,
We did, that's in there.
It's in the draft.
well, not really, because now we have, how do you, what defines it? You have some retailers saying they're not going to charge the fee, so that's one violation.
Right.
Is it just a standard violation?
Yes, it's one violation, and then if they are continued, they have
Well,
7
then
days
the-
to cure the
What if
problem.
they use the wrong bag? Is that a
It's a
citation?
separate violation.
Right.
7 days to fix it.
No, but is that the same category of violation?
Yep.
Yeah,
It's the
Last
same
time,
category
yeah,
of
we discussed
of
that.
violation.
yeah, last time we discussed that even if it was accidentally they had ordered the wrong bags, or if they had purposely refused to charge somebody, they would have 7 days because they would get the first warning.
Okay, so any non-compliance with this ordinance is a
Yes.
violation.
Correct.
Yes.
All of the same category, all of the same caliber.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And
All
we
the
also said
same
there's a
fine.
limit of one citable
Right.
violation per week,
Per week.
right? Which I think is legitimate.
Yeah,
And I do think that, to David's point, that at some threshold above whatever, after your 5th, 10th, 25th violation, there should be some
I think
more
then you move to daily violations.
extreme.
If somebody, I think 5 violations in a calendar year is sufficient. If you've committed 5 violations in a calendar year, then you're obviously purposely not complying with the statute, and I think you've gotta ratchet up the penalties at that point.
Okay, let me throw a scenario at you. So, a retailer has said, I'm not gonna charge for the bags. Or doesn't say it. Doesn't keep track of how you're gonna go in and make sure that they're paying.
Because
that
it's
they're
on the
charging.
receipt.
Sorry?
It has to be on the receipt. It has to be reflected on your receipt.
So you have to go in and
So if I'm
do a
the
transaction.
So if I'm the volunteer, I go to a customer who's leaving the establishment and say, hey, can I see your receipt? Right? And if the receipt, if the bag,
Okay, I'm
price
just
is
trying to walk this through,
Yeah.
fine.
so, you know, I go to the retailer and say, hey, I'm here to,
But how do we know the
Enforce this.
retailer actually collected the 10 cents?
it's on the
if it's on the
receipt.
receipt,
It has to be printed out.
If they're charging you, it's gonna go on the receipt, otherwise
Right.
they're not charging you.
Right,
You're
but
suggesting
but it
retailers
could be
should
on the
put it on the
receipt,
receipt,
and
not
the
actually collect it?
retailer at the
That's
cash register
just
could say,
bad math.
Don't
That would
worry
be
about it.
possible in
They're not
terms of
gonna do that.
accounting.
It's just computers.
No, they're not.
Yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
just too complicated, and that messes up, you know.
It's easy to do.
well, I guess,
It's very easy. It's very easy to do.
Well, I
Well,
don't,
is it
I
any-
don't think they're going to do that.
I guess to me, that's kind of borderlining on fraud, is saying your
Yeah,
transaction
I was
didn't
just, I
happen.
mean, if they're not charging what's on the receipt,
I'm
then
just trying to get to how we're defining violation.
Right.
That's all I'm
I
trying to
think
do.
it's the same here.
So there are, and how
And
we're
there are probably
going to
other
enforce.
laws violated if you do that, if you
Mhm.
print on things on receipts that don't, for transactions that don't actually occur.
So I guess my only concern is the interaction between, David, your suggestion of 5 and the weekly limit, because what we're saying is that basically someone could, you know, on January 1st, 8th, 15th, 22nd, and 29th, be cited for violations. At that point, you're not even out of January, and you're a recidivist, and your fines are gonna go daily. So to me, 5 seems like too small a number, right? But I guess I'm not, I don't, I'd be open to whatever.
You guys,
So-
stores are not going to do the wrong thing 5 times in a row.
Mhm.
We're not gonna
You
be
bet they
fining
are.
people. No.
But it's, like, it jumps in
You-
fee, it
you-
goes from 150 to 250 the second time, it doesn't, this does not specify what goes on after that, could you up?
I don't think you can increase the fines above that.
No,
250, I think, is the most of the town.
so every time after the second, you get a 250 charge.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a
And so you
$13,000 fee per year if they are cited every week.
Right, and then, but no more than one penalty shall be imposed upon a business within a 70 period, so it has to be every week, so you would get 4 for the month, because if, and then you're suggesting after that, go daily.
Well, David's suggesting go daily. I guess I'm just thinking that if it's weekly, 5 is not enough, because like, you know, the shoe guy.
Who's gonna do,
Yeah, there's a lot of time.
Yeah,
I
the
just
shoe guy
complicated
is
it.
not gonna rack up $150 fee, trust
It's
me.
$13,000 for the year, even
Right.
at
It
once a
doesn't-
week.
He's not gonna do, you
No, I'm
guys,
more
this is.
concerned about the big retailers that you mentioned before that says, I'm not gonna charge my customers a fee.
Well, it wasn't a big retailer, first of all. And second of all, when I explained, do you understand that there's a fine involved? Then we got some walk back. Okay, so I'm sorry if I gave the wrong information there. And it
Okay.
wasn't a big retailer, it was a small person who is not going to rack up the fines. I think this is overreach on our part. I think
Yeah.
the fine structure is fine in my
Yeah,
opinion.
I mean, that,
I
and
agree.
this officer, if they really gonna stop by every single day and start doing citations, like, I agree with you, I think that's too much.
We're trying to change consumers' behavior.
Right,
Right?
right.
Okay. We're not trying to be big brother to
But
stores.
I think that we do have to define exactly what constitutes a violation.
I think it's in here, Patrick,
Yeah.
pretty clear.
Okay, I'll reread it. But
Okay.
when I read it earlier, it was not clear to me.
Okay. Terry, are you comfortable with the enforcement answer?
I guess so.
Basically,
I'm just not comfortable with these, like, all of these different, the main thing is you wanna get rid of the plastics. So to me, going to 12 mils, again, I stick by, the only thing that's gonna get people to change, you charge $1 a bag. It's the only thing that's gonna work. All this other
Okay,
stuff
well,
is.
when you look at the
so-
sheet, you'll see that nobody charges a buck a
I
bag,
know,
okay?
I know, so it's not realistic, but that's the only way to really do it. So the enforcement, yes, if we can get it spelled out like we did a little bit more, I do not support any external FTEs, town hall, pensions, long-term costs.
Understand
Period.
that if we pass this ordinance, it will be up to the Board of Selectmen to figure out a way to enforce it. And it is possible, because of what happened with the blight, that they will have to
Right.
end up hiring a part-time person. They want that less than you,
Yes.
but it is a possibility.
I agree.
And that will go through the RTM at budget season, and we can make our feelings known.
But I almost
You
think
know,
that it's the opposite in terms of misdemeanors reported on a yearly basis, because A, more people will be changing behavior every year, and B, the tendency to report blight is very different than to report a misdemeanor by a store, or, I think the motives behind the two are different. So my hope would be that there wouldn't be a whole lot. When the blight thing came in, that was one of the objections that some people had, that, I don't like my neighbor's paint color, and I can report it.
Well, you, for the blight, you need to hit certain bullet points, so it's,
It's only
Yeah,
two of
I mean, I
the-
can still waste some.
No,
It's
but
not-
blight impacts people's property values, and if people perceive that something happening on somebody else's property is affecting their property value, they're much more motivated to come and make complaints about it. I
Right.
think this is not gonna be the sort of thing that's gonna issue that, engender that sort of excitement.
And also somebody had mentioned about the whole, like, maybe we make a suggestion to BYOE to do that whole rating system that they were talking, because that's again the positive, last meeting, I don't remember who suggested that maybe there's like like the food, restaurant rating, we have the same BYOB rating, and
Okay, well, that, we'll definitely let BYO run with
Yeah.
that, yeah.
Yeah,
Dick, what did you wanna
Well,
say?
I just wanna say, since we're gonna have, the ultimate thing is plastics eliminated, we'll have 40% paper bags. I don't have a problem if a merchant doesn't charge. To me, if a merchant wants to give the bag and not charge 10 cents, that's fine with me. Because he's now given a recyclable 40% paper bag. So this idea that they have to charge 10 cents, I don't agree with. To me, that's an individual business decision. If they wanna absorb the cost, that's fine.
Okay.
but this came about.
Okay, wait a second. Frank?
Yeah, so I just was having trouble understanding section 7C, which says the person to whom a citation has been issued shall be responsible for reporting in writing subsequent compliance to the environmental compliance officer
I underline the same thing.
until such time the fine shall continue to be imposed. So I don't understand, I mean, if we walk into Stop and Shop on February 1st of, or it's a 60-day period, so April 1st of 2020, and they are giving out plastic bags, and they get a violation, right? That I understand, right? But does Stop and Shop then have to write to the environmental compliance officer that they are now complying?
Yes.
Yes.
So, dear officer, I am truly sorry for my violation. I've stopped giving out
Forgive me, I have
plastic.
sinned.
Yeah,
Are
to
you
be,
Catholic?
no.
I got it.
But there's a funny story there, but it's not appropriate for
Okay.
time. But so I guess I just find this perplexing.
Which one?
7C.
7C.
I would.
I think,
I would-
I think the idea is that, you know, once the citation has been issued, then it's incumbent upon that person to then demonstrate that they've taken some sort of steps to stop giving out whatever plastic.
They have to go to the
bags.
blackboard and write, I
The
will not
action-
give out
No,
non-plastic
but,
bags.
but you could say, you know, show an invoice for, you know, bags that you've now purchased that are in compliance.
Hang on. The person has to do, if you run a shop and you have a violation, you have to do two things. You have to pay your fine, you have to stop giving out non-compliant bags. Those are the two things you have to do. And then the officer's gonna come by again at some future time to check to make sure you're complying.
It should be a week later.
So
It should
you
be
want
1
this
week
edited
later,
out?
because
I would
that's
take that out.
the-
I mean, you just have to
No, but-
respond to the violation by paying your
I
fine.
agree.
But don't you think what it says is actually that you will be charged every 7 days unless you report that you've taken action. I think that's done to reduce the number of hours that the officer has to spend going week after week, because then the onus is on the business owner to let him know or her know that.
But what if I write back, screw you, here's my $150, I'm giving out the bags I wanna give out? Does that mean that
Well, then
the?
the
It
officer
says
can put back
that-
in your doorstep and say.
No, no,
say
no,
it's
but
against
No,
the law.
it's
But
more
like-
likely,
but like,
I'm in
but-
compliance, here's my $150, and then you don't
No,
come
but it
back for 2
says
more
that the
months, and I've
fines
been
will
doing whatever I wanna do
continue.
for it.
It says the fines will continue until, am I reading that
Yeah, no, that
correctly?
should come out. That makes it sound like if you come into compliance, you're no longer subject to the fine.
Yeah, so I think
I
this
mean, that last sentence seems to be.
paragraph C is all just
unclear.
confusing. If you
The
have a
fines shall
violation,
continue to be imposed
if
in
you
the
break,
7
if you don't, if you break the rules, you have a violation.
So the one
you pay a
above it
fine.
says
And then, it's like you speed,
no more than,
right? I
you know,
sped,
one
I got caught,
every 7
I got a
days.
ticket,
And
I paid the
fines
fine,
will
and
continue
I go again
unless-
and send no more if we're gonna stay on Catholic fee.
Oh, so
And then, you know,
automatic
if,
second fine?
if you get caught speeding again by the same officer, a different officer, I pay another
Makes
fine.
the officer time less.
Yeah.
I mean, I would just get rid of that paragraph C entirely.
Okay,
I find it confusing.
Is that the consensus?
okay. This is a TGS&A, entry, so I will ask them what they think, but I will say.
If I'm misunderstanding it, then I
Okay.
would withdraw the objection, but I find it
Okay.
very
Yeah,
confusing.
because until such time, the fines shall continue to be imposed, so the environmental officer still has to go back anyway.
But it's a
No,
one-time
no,
fine.
no.
You gave out a
The
non-compliant bag on
officer will
February 8th.
not go, then it's an automatic process, the fines are going till you put a stop to it. That is how I read it. So every 7 days you are
I read
getting
that.
fined
But it just means
unless
that
you say you fix the problem.
when you send in your
I didn't get
check,
that.
you're gonna say, here's my check, I'm now in compliance.
Peter, what you just described is very different from what I understand.
Yeah, that's what, exactly.
What I understand is if you give out a non-compliant bag on a particular day and the officer catches you doing that, or if you're not putting the amount of the bag fee on your receipt, those are the violations, right? And if you do that, then without any recourse, those are violations and you get charged a fine, right? And then the officer can come back 7 days or more after that and check again, and if you violate again, you can get fined again.
Right.
Right? but there's not an ongoing, naughty list and nice
Current
list.
citation.
Yeah, and like, where's that automatic,
Yeah.
what kind of
Yeah.
technology do we have that is automatically
This is-
I
charges
think
stuff?
Yeah, just, you have a violation,
We
you
don't have-
pay a fine, you have another violation, you pay another fine.
Okay, I'll get clarification.
Yeah, I find this confusing.
Okay,
So are we doing edits to this proposed draft right now? Because there's a couple of things here, like section 2.3 is redundant of 2.4. We don't need, there's a defined term charge which is never used again, and then there's environmental charge,
Yeah,
and the definitions are identical.
Right.
Environmental
wait,
charge.
slow down, David, where
Okay,
is?
section, page 3, section 2.3 should be
Mhm.
deleted.
Okay,
I was just reading that
Yeah.
same exact thing, like,
It-
what
Yeah,
the heck?
it's identical language, it was just,
okay,
section section 7.d, that right below what we're just looking at, says the first selectman shall appoint one or more hearing officers. It should be environmental compliance hearing officer. Section D, first line,
Sorry, what page you on?
six.
page 6. The first selectman
Section
shall
7.
appoint one or more,
Yep.
should say environmental compliance hearing officer. Then they say other than an employee of the town. I'm not sure why TGS&A put that in there, or why we wanna pose that limitation on the selectmen. I mean, that should be up to them who they wanna appoint, whether it's an employee or not.
Other than the employee.
So I would suggest deleting other
I
than an
thought that-
employee of the
Yeah,
town.
we talked about changing that, I thought that was, okay,
Yeah.
so what, I'm sorry, David, slow down, cause I'm writing it
That's,
down.
that's fine.
What do you want it to say?
I would just, it should be one or more environmental compliance hearing officers, because that's the defined term.
Okay,
And then the next phrase, other than an employee of the town, should probably come out.
I agree.
And then, I had comments on section 8, paragraph B, which is the hearing section, and maybe I should just send them to you, because I think there are
Yeah.
a few things, just more legal things, and that should be
Yeah.
put in
Yeah,
there.
I didn't understand timely appeal.
Yeah, well, there's that. There should be a time frame for taking an appeal. And, you know, it should set forth, you know, the hearing is to receive facts and evidence and hear arguments with respect to the appeal. Notice should be to all parties, the hearing officer, you know, who, the compliance officer issued the citation. They should get the notice, especially if they're a volunteer, to make sure they show up at the hearing. You know, the last sentence makes no sense to me. Any assessment or penalty by the hearing officer shall be entered as a judgment against the violator.
Can't do that.
You know, that's not usually what happens with fines, unless Connecticut is very different from New York. So it wouldn't be a judgment. So I can send some comments to
will
you.
you do that, I'm
I think
writing
it's
down,
probably the easiest
David
thing.
will be sending out the comments.
Yeah.
I have a comment. I'm
Do
on
that
page,
tomorrow.
I'm on page 2. And for perspective, I can't remember the number of times we've tried to go back and understand intent of why RTMs and various ordinances have come into place and trying to go back 10 years and figure it out. The purpose here, I think, just needs to be expanded. I'm on the second to last line,
Mhm.
where it says paper checkout bags to help, and I would insert businesses defray the incremental cost to businesses for providing recycled paper checkout bags instead of plastic checkout bags. And I would add a line, and to encourage consumers to bring their own reusable bags. That would be the purpose of this.
Okay, what's the last line?
Last line, something to the effect that, and to encourage consumers to bring their own reusable bags.
Well,
So
that's
on
in
the
the
header-
first- that's in-
Patrick, I support that completely, but it is the last line of the last whereas.
And it's also in the second and third line, right? This ordinance is intended to reduce bag waste in order to protect and preserve the environment in Darien for the benefit and welfare of its residents by encouraging the use of the use of reusable checkout bags.
Yep.
So isn't that last line that you're proposing kind of redundant of that?
You're right, I would throw that.
Okay. agree with you, though, it's good to have a purpose section so that, you know, people understand what we're all thinking.
Well, you're thinking.
But the businesses should be inserted, because it's not,
It's fine.
it's not.
Okay. Anyone else?
I'm on page 4, 2.12. Number 2 has a minimum lifetime of 125 uses. I would just simply insert at least 125.
That's pretty standard language.
It is?
Yes. Yes, that's just cut and pasted from a bazillion other ordinances that read just like that.
Okay.
And
Because you have minimum,
it doesn't say minimum. It says,
has a minimum lifetime of 125 uses.
oh, right. That's what I get for speed reading.
Well, you know what though, we're going to have another meeting, and so,
I had another question though.
okay, so while you have this document, you know, some of the things will be changing, and you can look at it and bring more comments to the next meeting.
How is it decided that the penalties and fees go to the general fund?
Probably because that's what other towns are doing.
Where would you like it to go?
Where would you like me to go? Yep. We're writing the ordinance. Your bank account?
I like it. I like the idea of the
Chase.
separate accounts like we just did the other night for the fireworks, you know, like maybe have a, you know, some kind of.
But it's not going into a separate account. The fireworks money is going into the general fund, right, isn't it?
No,
No,
they
no,
said a
I
separate
thought they-
account.
I thought he said that it was
A separate account that they're gonna start
Understood.
doing that, because there were a lot of things that kinda just
Right.
go in. You
Oh, I
would know
thought they
better.
said a separate line, a separate budget account, not a separate,
Bank
like,
account.
bank
Yeah,
account.
like a sub-account within,
In the Parks and Rec budget,
yeah,
what we're talking about.
yes, so maybe if we could carve it out to keep
Yeah,
track of it.
That's still the general fund, I mean.
Well, there will be a there is a report due from the environmental officer on activity and
Right.
fees and all. I just
Right.
wonder if we ought to think about that.
Some places use the money to, for education.
Right.
So, like for instance, New York City, they had a proposal and it got shot down, and one of the cost sharings was a nickel went to the store and a penny went to the, or two, a nickel went to the store and a penny went to the city. So, or it would be that it would go 100% towards, I think California's goes towards an educational outreach.
And Terry, to your point, there will be a line item in the budget showing the revenue coming in on the revenue side. So, you know, it'll appear in the budget, just how it gets spent is what you're talking about, whether we want to direct, you know, what the purpose of the fund is for, or the.
And hopefully we have no money to spend.
Right, I agree. But if there is money, then maybe it should go.
Well, shouldn't some of it at least be used for compensating any cost that the town incurs in executing this whole
Absolutely.
ordinance?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I would think that
So then you just leave it there and let the selectmen decide what to do with it.
Well, we went to the athletic, place and talked to them, and actually Jamie talked to them about doing some kind of a recyclable bag. So, it's an idea, paying for it that way.
Can I make one additional comment?
Yes.
I'm on the last page 8, section 12, the annual report. It's asking for the number of complaints received, warnings issued, citations issued, fines assessed and collected. Those are all great, but I would add the number of unique businesses inspected and the number of inspection events. So how many businesses are we checking up on? And how many compliance visits have we made? Right?
So say it again.
So the number of unique businesses, is inspected the right word, or?
Yeah.
Visited, yep, and then the number of individual visits performed by compliance officers.
Remember, this could be a volunteer.
Right, well, that's just saying, hey, if you're going out today, how many stores you're going to, and how many visits are you doing, right? And then over the course of the year, how many stores did you go to and how many visits did you do, right? Because if you're getting 50 citations, does that mean that you visited 50 businesses and no one's complying,
Right.
right? Or did you visit, 200 businesses and, you did 1,000 visits and there's only 50 tickets, that's pretty good.
Okay, so you're gonna write up what you'd like to see and send
Okay, I'll
it to
send
me.
you a note on that.
I would
Is
even
that,
add-
is that in fact the scope of what the town is envisioning for this
No,
officer?
no, no.
Yeah, I don't think so.
So what am I
I
missing?
know it's late, I have one last thought and comment here, looking at section 7 again, subparagraph D, about the appointment of the environmental compliance hearing officer. The way this is drafted now is the first selectman appoints one or more hearing officers. That's pretty unique in the way this town operates. Usually it's the board of selectmen that does it. I don't think the
Yeah.
first selectman has the right to appoint people like this on his or her own.
Okay, which one, where is it?
So it should be section 7D.
Seven.
Board of
Yeah,
Selectmen,
the board of selectmen, not the
Yeah.
first selectmen.
Frank, I would add, if possible, if the volunteers would like to kind of keep track of how long does it take, so that you can contemplate if an FTE is ever required from a town person. This person spent on average 10 minutes per visit, rough estimates. Then you can quantify if you were
Yeah,
to
but
add
you don't wanna
something.
put that, you don't wanna put that.
You don't wanna put it on it, but somehow if
But
they
wouldn't they-
if they're
wouldn't
doing
they-
that anyway, like,
Yeah,
oh, I spent 10
wouldn't
minutes.
they want to do that though?
You would
Wouldn't-
think, but maybe
yeah.
just put it as a, if you can.
Okay, okay.
I don't
If you
know.
want
I don't
that
think an
in
ordinance
there,
is
then
allowed
you
by
write
statute.
that and send it to me.
Sure.
Okay.
This is just something, again, getting back to the takeout places, but if you go to page 4, product bag, again, some of the exception here, contain unwrapped prepared foods or bakery goods. That to me would read takeout food because it's unwrapped or it's probably in like a, I don't know, that to me, like either the unwrapped bit, like, I don't, again, and you guys can all speak up, but that to me would be, if I were a takeout joint, I would think like that would make me exempt.
No, but the first line says means a plastic or paper non-checkout bag without limitation. So it means you can't walk out of the store with the bags that are described here.
Great, so you can have the bag from the bakery
Right.
in Stop and Shop and bring that to your checkout. That's okay, but you can't then take that single bag out of the store, is that what you're saying, David?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because checkout bag is a defined term, I believe,
It is.
right?
Yeah.
So it actually should be capitalized here, but, yeah, checkout bag means a carry-out bag used by customers for checkout, so,
As opposed to a product bag.
yeah.
So if I get something from the bakery and I don't want to get a checkout bag,
Mm-hmm.
I can't just take the bakery bag and walk out?
You can,
You can.
you can.
Oh,
So,
yeah,
but
misunderstood.
the store can't, like,
The bag is exempt.
yes, the bag is fine.
Fine.
Okay,
The bag is fine.
that's it.
All right, okay, as long as you guys understand it.
Okay.
Well, no, everybody has to understand.
But I mean, big picture, we're changing behavior by limiting what the retailers can offer their customers,
Right.
right? So what we're saying is we wanna continue to allow the retailers to offer their customers a bag at the bakery's shop
Yeah, that makes sense to
to
me.
check out,
Right,
right? What we don't want, however, is for someone to then offer such a big bag at the bakery shop that they can put all the rest of their groceries in, right? For example.
Wink, wink.
And
Does
on
that make
that
sense,
note,
Lindsay?
yeah,
Okay, so can I summarize? Lindsay, you're gonna go shopping in Greenwich.
no, I'm going to call the Chamber of Commerce.
Greenwich, all right.
With the
I know,
future,
that's totally different.
Lindsay, with the future money that is going to be collected from the funds.
Yeah, right.
That's going to be used
I
for
don't think
that.
there's a,
Yeah, right.
we're not giving any advance.
I'm
David,
just
you're gonna send
calling
me your
chamber.
ordinance.
and it's on the appeal process, I'll try to do that tomorrow.
Okay, Patrick, you're going to look into, recyclable cost
Where to source,
bags?
and
Frank,
cost.
we know what we're doing, right? Okay, anyone else have anything?
When do we tackle styrofoam?
Okay, so our next meeting is, I think the 12th,
Coming up, yeah.
yeah.
our committee meeting,
It's-
not the RTM meeting.
It's the 11th, okay? So I will be out of town until that Sunday night, on a vacation that I had to postpone. And don't forget that Sunday is daylight savings, so just a heads up. So is everybody
It's the
still,
11th?
is everybody still okay for Monday the 11th for our meeting? That's a regularly scheduled meeting. Okay?
Yes.
Sound okay? Okay, so I don't remember where the room was, but I'll send you out a reminder.
Question, so we didn't have quorum when we started, and we're gonna approve the minutes
Oh,
of the special
yes.
meeting on February 7th?
Yes.
So.
Can I have a make a motion to approve the minutes from February 7th?
Motion.
And was anybody not here? Okay, motion second?
I'll second it.
No,
Second?
but Dick has a, you're going to say you wanna change this.
Yeah, I wanna change that to the date of, I have to take my glasses off to see, January 20th.
January.
So the last
Just
sentence,
to
you gotta
clarify.
say what you're changing.
So I think,
We're gonna make a correction on the date.
Of the minutes. Or the meeting.
The minutes. It's correct, it's wrong, right? It should say 2020, not January, not 2019.
Correct, correct, so, yeah. So what's reflected in the minutes is that the ordinance would start January 1st, 2019, which is 2 months ago now. Instead, I think we want
Okay,
to
so
change the
the
minutes.
ordinance start date in the minutes
Would
to
be 1/1/2020.
2020 from 2019.
Correct.
Got it.
Other than that,
And how do those minutes get changed? Does somebody give them to
You,
Donna?
Yeah, you, we make a motion to correct, so can I have a motion to approve the minutes with that correction?
I think we moved that. and-
Okay, second?
Second.
Okay.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Was everybody here for that meeting?
Okay.
I don't know.
No, I was not, so I
Okay, so
can't
you
vote.
abstained, and everybody else was in favor.
I can't
Mhm.
vote.
And no opposed? Okay. Minutes approved. Okay, could I have a does anyone else have anything else to add?
We're not gonna talk about Star.
No, we're not, no. Does anyone else have anything else to add?
I move we adjourn.
I had,
You're here.
good job, you did a lot of work, Monica.
Thank you,
Yes,
Monica.
did.
Thank you, Monica.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A lot of work.
Monica, meeting's adjourned, right?
Meeting is adjourned.
I actually sent you a link that I found for the recycled content bag